J. Lumsden Taylor is a multi-award-winning ESG and sustainability leader, and a published thought leader with a Master of Science in Sustainable Finance. He is a member of the ICAEW, ACA, and serves on several institute advisory groups. Deeply engaged in sustainability, business resilience, and climate change since 2006. He has contributed to the King Charles Accounting for Sustainability Project, A4S, and has worked extensively with UK and European authorities. He also served as the relationship lead for the UN SDG Project UK, shaping sustainability and climate change parameters, and leading the development of MHA's business and climate-related sustainability service line. His detailed work with SMEs, mid-cap companies, and large enterprises led to the creation of the groundbreaking Purpose with Profit model, which demonstrates that environmental and climate action must also enhance business health to ensure meaningful engagement. Mark founded the influential Rural Policy Group, bringing together government, scientists, producers, and retailers to build a fair and sustainable UK food chain. This initiative directly informed the creation of a parliamentary working group on the subject. With experience spanning both public and private sectors, he also operated a large educational establishment for over 15 years before joining MHA. In 2024, he was recognized as a UNGC UK Top 5 Pioneer. His sector specializations include agriculture, food and farming, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, fashion, digital, ESG, and education. Mark has received numerous honors, including National Finance Director of the Year, ICAEW Accounting for Sustainability National Award, National Business Finance Director Award, Institute for Fiscal Turnaround Public Sector Award, Institute of Directors Blue Ribbon Award for Governance and Finance Excellence. He also serves as an ambassador for Kent and is a committed charity trustee.
Well, a very good morning to you all. It's very strange. I don't think I've ever been introduced by an AI voice before. So just for reference, if I can have that recording at the end, it'll save a lot of people ultimately when at my funeral, they can just listen to that, can't they? So problem solved, right? Problem solved. So anyway, it's a very, very, very great privilege to be addressing you all. And thank you very much for asking us to speak today. One of the things that I would actually like to just talk about before we get in here is a little bit, whilst that was very kind of my official corporate who I am, just a little bit more about me, because it will also inform, I think, some of the conversation today. Firstly and foremost, I know there's a number of Baker Tilly people here as well. I trained as a chartered accountant at a company called McIntyre Hudson, which has now become MHA Baker Tilly International. And I turned down what was Coopers & Lybrand, sorry, PwC people in the room, but McIntyre Hudson, just cooler, and they were more fun. And when you're 21, 22, not quite deciding what you want to do with your life, it seemed like the better option, to be blunt, and progression was different in those days. And I spent my formative years at the firm, and I've only really held two jobs. Firstly, as a chartered accountant, global business person, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But the other thing is, what the other side of it is, I stepped out of practice at 26 years old, because in those days, forgive me, it was literally dead man's shoes, and you would be made a partner when somebody fell off their perch, and you would usually be in your late 40s, 50s. I liken it a little bit to our progression as a monarchy, where the Queen died in 90-something, and the King's now, not doing great, is he? And let's fingers crossed he will. I know Charles very well, and fingers crossed he will stay on as long. But it was that kind of culture in those days that you would get promoted when somebody else wasn't a partner. And I chose not to wait that long. So I took over what was a bankrupt, failed institution known as Hadlow, a small educational land-based college in the southeast England. Those of you that know your geography, so you've got London at in the middle, and then southeast towards Dover. So that's kind of what I took over. And my friends thought I'd had a bad day when I resigned, because they said, why are you not going into Barclays? Why are you not going to banking? All your friends are at banking, loads of money. And I went, it's not about the money, actually. It's about, I wanted to make a fundamental difference rather than simply just making lots and lots and lots of money for other people and not actually affecting any change. And I said, anyone can make money. It's quite easy, bluntly. It isn't hard. But I said, this is about making an effective change. So, and when I wrote my resignation letter, the chairman of the office, who is now chairman of the main board, Rakesh Shornak, said, Mark, you're simply having a bad day because this reads like you don't want to go. And I said, well, I don't really want to go, but I don't really have a choice. And anyway, 15 years on, and you heard some of the things we did. And when people say, well, what actually did you do when you were outside of the profession, when I returned in 2018-19 and faced some really tough times and some really tough challenges. So I've been to the brink and back, so I know what it's like to face absolute bankruptcy. And when you're 26 years old and you're sitting there and all your friends are out drinking in the city, having fun, they're all, similar age groups, and you're sitting there with the head of estates who's 55, trying to work out whether or not we can pay to keep the lights on, pay the salary bill, or simply feed the livestock. It really makes you grow up. And I thought I knew it all as a chartered accountant at 25. Don't we all? We're qualified. We know it all, right? I knew nothing. And when you have to stand up in front of a room like this, obviously a lot smaller, and say 50% of you are going to be made redundant and we're going to create some new roles, it was tough. It was very tough. And people say, well, what did you do? 78,000 students got a better chance in life than they otherwise wouldn't have had we not did what we did at the Hadlow Group. And we created the largest educational UK corporate group, and actually in France as well, so sort of pan-Europe as well. Didn't get as far as Africa, but I will come back to that in a moment. So the reason I'm telling you all of this is that the standard pathway of being a chartered accountant doesn't necessarily need to be your standard pathway. And this isn't an educational presentation, but it's very relevant context and very valid for the work of what the Institute of Chartered Accountants is doing in Zimbabwe, the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, and the wider accountancy profession. Because not only are we here to learn, we're here to provide true and fair opinions and views on your day jobs, your accounts and everything else, and your clients. We also have a custodial responsibility, because aren't we responsible for truth and fairness? And if we're not getting it right, what are we saying to the next generation? We are custodians of that. And when we talk about sustainability and we talk about environmental social governance, what is the first and foremost fundamental principle around that? I don't expect you to know that. The point, it's truth, actually. It's not about whether or not the Earth's going to get warm. And how's that going in Africa, by the way? All good? Yeah? Everything fine? Any climate deniers that think the Earth isn't warming up, there's a special door for you, the exit. So no problems there. It's nonsense. And we live in challenging times. We live in political turmoil. And part of the reasons when the ICAEW asked me to speak today was to give our slight perspective. So I represent a global firm as MHA when I returned. So I'll talk a little bit more about how we are as a practice a little bit later. But when I joined MHA, we were, 250 staff? Small business, very different to who we are now. So I just wanted to put that into perspective. And as we get going, there will be a little bit of interaction, but it will be me sort of talking at you for quite a bit. But I don't use Slido. I hate it. I absolutely hate it, because it's just an excuse for people not to have any confidence to ask any questions. And you're accountants. You should have confidence. You're signing other people's accounts off, for goodness sake. So if you have got questions, you can, I think we've got roving mics and people can please do ask questions. And with my educational hat on, there is no such thing as an idiotic question. So happy to ask or listen to comments or whatever you feel is important to you personally, as well as to the organizations to which you serve. So we're going to start by just putting a little bit of context. So I'm here to talk about environmental social governance and sustainability. I can spend all day talking to you about education, agriculture, food and farming. I can talk about a range of different subjects, politics. However, I'm here to talk to you about one of my specialist subjects. And I've been dealing with this space for a very long time. So if you ask yourselves a question, just yourselves, and we probably won't put your hands up towards the end, but we'll see. Did you personally really understand the importance of sustainability and environmental social governance 10 years ago? Or have you now started to recognize it because it's a thing and it's something that businesses are talking about? And a supplementary to that is, do you think businesses are talking about it because it has a financial risk to their organization or benefit? In other words, I can make some cash. If I had £1 for every time a sustainability consultant or specialist contacts me on a social media channel, I would not need to work. I really would not. I collect them. And it gives me grave cause for concern that a lot of businesses can get caught out by that. So with that in mind, let's have a little bit of an exercise. So why is it important to us and to business? So imagine this jar represents your firm, or let's say your biggest client. Okay? So, let's say this is everything they do. Is the jar now full? They're apples, FYI. No, it's not. What about now? No, so that's coffee. What about now? Yeah? No? If this was an afternoon presentation, I would actually have some beers on the table, and I have done this live before, but it went a bit wrong. So we haven't and it's way too early in the day, yeah? Maybe tomorrow night, your gala dinner perhaps, but anyway, it's pretty full, and that represents sugar. So imagine you look at the business. The apples represent the really big things: people, money, your products. For us, it's this, isn't it? That's our product. The coffee represents, if you like, everything else. Digital structures, supply chains, customer chains, workforce retention, all those other things that you must have in place to make the business work. And let's then say that the sugar, if you like, is all those other things. Emails on a Friday evening, what I refer to as life administration, all the things you can't get round to during the week because you're so busy. And I was talking to Jonathan about when travel was actually quite enjoyable. So when you're traveling around the world, you're traveling for business, everything switched off, didn't it, when you boarded the aircraft, because the internet wasn't really around. Now it's 24/7. You can't really enjoy your flights so much these days, which is a bit depressing, really. But nonetheless, it's just constant, isn't it? So if you take those three components, right, if you fill the jar up with all the life admin or your business, would you be able to deal with the important things? It's not going to work, is it? It's just simply not going to work. Or you try to do the additional points, as in the coffee and the sugar, still not going to work. The fundamentals are your apples. So my question to you is, so where does sustainability and environmental social governance sit right now? Is it the coffee? Is it the sugar? Is it the apples? It's not rhetorical, but have a think. For some, surely it will be coffee. It may be coffee or sugar, right? For those businesses that are absolutely DNA'd into this, it will be the apples. Do many of you know much about the British food industry? Your supermarkets, yeah? Have you heard of Tesco? Yeah? Have you heard of Marks and Spencer? Heard of Aldi? Yes? Okay. And there are others, obviously. Other brands perfectly acceptable. So, what's the most sustainable supermarket in the United Kingdom? Pardon? Did you say Lidl? There is CPD going on in these 3 days, right? Because Your second point was that Waitrose you just said, certainly up there for sure. Very honourable company, part of the John Lewis partnership. It's Marks and Spencer. Marks and Spencer, the finance director, sat next to me on Prince Charles, as was, accounting for Sustainability Task Force. And we were having dinner with him at the Palace, not just James Room, but it was part of the process. And he was the finance director that introduced Plan A because there is no Plan B. And he said, this is going to take us 10 years to get right. And he said, we're going to spend a minimum of 100 million, if not more. And there'll be successive CFOs. He said, he would move on at some point. CEOs and the board have been mandated to carry this out, whatever, because they knew in 10 years' time they'd market lead it. And M&S have had a really torrid time over the years, but they're absolutely flying now. Who's the worst? It's not that one you said. It's Tesco. They treat their supply chain appallingly. They were hauled out for fraud and insider trading about 4 or 5 years ago. And they are pilot high, sell it cheap, and they couldn't care less. But they are regulatory required to report. So they do the absolute bare minimum. It's nothing to do with their brand. They don't care about it. They're not interested in it. Though they say they are, they're not. Absolutely not. But M&S, it's part of their DNA. It's part of what that brand represents. And the reason why I tell you that story is because when you look at the accountancy profession and you look at the accountancy world, at MHA, we took the decision, or rather I convinced the board to take the decision, but they did listen and they did take it seriously, that they needed to take this really seriously to distinguish us. If we want to play in the big tier 1, tier 2 accountancy, so big 4 and then basically the tier underneath, top 10, we have to be walking the walk. And I said, there is absolutely no way I'm going to put my reputation on the line if we are not going to do it properly. Because writing reports and putting things online is very easy, but actually doing it. And remember, part of that is the credibility of what we then do for our clients. I know this is kind of part of CPD as well, but an interesting thing that if you want to read about kind of what's gone on with the United Kingdom a little bit, and it's relevant because it's ICAEW linked, is 2023, the Financial Reporting Council published an investigative review of the FTSE auditors, FTSE 100 auditors, and their approach to auditing climate risk in the financial statements. If you want to see how not to do it, it's a really good report. Now, at that time, we didn't audit FTSE 100, but we looked at that report and we analysed it and said, well, okay, let's see if it had done it to us. How compliant were we? And we were about 90%. So 9 out of 10 I'd give us. Still had things to do because I absolutely believe leadership is learning. You will never fully, if you think you are fully 100% on everything, then you're in the wrong business. Accountancy is learning. Every day is a school day for me. I learn something new every single day. I mean, for the problem of this, I learned that an international conference, can be booked the week of the national last bank holiday. So I learned something with this process, right? So I think I was the only person in Canterbury wearing a suit this morning. Even the people in the banks probably weren't wearing suits, but I am very delighted to be here. And on that basis, hello and welcome from behalf, I suppose, the United Kingdom. I'm quite closely linked with the University of Kent, and you've picked a lovely venue. The University of Kent is a tremendous venue, and it's a really nice campus. The students here get a great experience, and I think it's still in the top 10 or certainly in the top 15 of universities in the United Kingdom. So yeah, it's a great venue, and hope you have a really good conference. So let's get into sustainability. And when you look at that, sustainability is changing the way we do things, right? And you'll notice I'm referring to sustainability and environmental social governance. There is a difference, and I'm going to explain that. And apologies if some of this and it's a bit basic, but I will get quite technical later. But I want you to understand the differential to this. And I'm going to talk to you about the approach that we have adopted as MHA, Baker Tilly. And I'm also going to talk to you about the credibility and the technical side of what we should be doing as accountants. And if everyone in here, or the firms that you represent, think you can do sustainability from an auditing perspective and from an advisory and assurance perspective, nonsense, utter nonsense. Hell, even we still learn every day, and we've invested a lot of money. There are organisations, and I work very close with the ICAEW, that bluntly in the UK shouldn't be doing it, shouldn't be providing those services. And regulation is changing, and regulation is coming. And it's coming, interestingly, increasingly to Africa as well. The challenge in Africa historically has been you can put the regulation in, but who's going to regulate it? That's often been the challenge. Who regulates the regulators as well? So and often it can be used as political football. We're not oblivious to that in the UK too. And also in Europe, it is a huge political football at the moment. And again, I'll try not to bombard you with numerous acronyms. So, a little bit of shameless promotion of who we are. So, we are part of Baker Tilly International. When I started at MH, we were just McIntyre Hudson. We're now MHA Baker Tilly International. We are the UK lead member firm. Complicated about who owns the brand, but we are the UK lead member firm. So our brand is indistinguishable from Baker Tilly International. We are part of a global network, and we're really proud of that. So we actually have offices in Kenya, and then we've got offices all over Africa, the ones in particular because I work with them, and also in South Africa as well. But we spend a lot of time, obviously, in our work in Europe. We were the first accountancy firm to take the brave decision that we listed on the UK stock markets this year. So if you look up MHA IPO, we listed on the alternative investment markets this year because we didn't want to sell out and sell our soul to private equity. We wanted to be in control. And we've just completed our first acquisition of Baker Tilly Southeast Europe. So it's where I was in the last couple of months. So we now, part of our firm is Cyprus, Greece, Romania, Bulgaria, and Moldova. Not the countries per se, the actual offices. We haven't taken the countries or anything like that. Those days are gone. We've done that. So we are really proud of that. But as a firm, we are 300 million in the UK, but we're global. So that's how we behave. We deal with companies all over the world, some of the largest companies in the world, and we punch well above our weight, which means anyone can do that. So we often work with our colleagues in different offices. We have clients in Mozambique as well. And the reason I know that's because a lot of our clients are miners. And some firms have turned around and said, we're going to be more sustainable. So what we're going to do is we're going to divest our operations out, and we're not going to audit any mining clients or any oil and gas clients. Our response to that is, well, that's stupid. Firstly, those industries are not going anywhere. Secondly, shouldn't you be using the excellence that you have as a firm and challenging those businesses rather than just rubber stamping and them going to another auditing firm so they can just tick a box? So I flipped that argument quite robustly. 143 territories we employ. Actually, it's about 46,000 staff now. There's been some more acquisitions this year as well. £7 billion revenues. So we can take the fight as Baker Tilly to the big four, which we're quite proud of. So, two quotes that I'm particularly proud of. Rakesh is our chairman. He actually interviewed me when I was 22. So when he was the regional office chairman, he actually interviewed me. So I've known him all my career. What we deliver for you as our clients, we expect of ourselves. I'm a firm believer in this. And when you're standing up in front of a room like this with 2,000 or 3,000 students and you're giving the annual address, they're looking at you thinking, and students are so clever, aren't they? That they can see through a lie like that. I would have no problem standing up in front of a panel of MPs at an all-parliamentary select committee. No problem. Not nervous. Standing up in front of 1,000 students who are much younger than me, terrifying. Utterly terrifying, because they know and they can see when you're lying, and they can tell. They do, don't they? They just know. And if you pause or you misjudge your enunciation of a word, and you can just watch the room change. So I've lost rooms in the past, and I've kind of retrieved them, and then sometimes I thought, I've got to cut this short, I've lost them. Anyway, but my point is, we need to walk the walk as well as do what we say do what we expect of our clients. And then corporate sustainability doesn't have to come at the cost of corporate profitability. If anyone in here thinks that sustainability is just being really philanthropic and just doing the right thing because you should, Do you really think the shareholders of Unilever are all interested in that? They're not. They're interested in financial and corporate returns. But the two things are mutually inclusive. They shouldn't be mutually exclusive. And I know as you are all businesses in this room, right? Some of you might be owner managed. Some of you may be part of you will be part of bigger firms. Your managing partners and your finance partners will turn around and go, well, what's the return on investment? What's your chargeable hours? How are we billing our clients for this additional services, be it sustainability, ESG, tax, advisory, internal audit? Incidentally, I also oversee the internal audit function of the firm, and it's gone through a real metamorphosis over the last couple of years because clients were saying, well, we don't have to do it legally unless we're in the FTSE 100. So what's the value proposition? Oh, well, it's nice to check your controls. And what's the proposition? What's that value that gives businesses if you like, the requirement? So this is how we do it as MHA. And we took what environmental social governance is and we created our interpretation, which is innovation, trust, talent. What are we as accountancy firms? People, right? What's our biggest asset? Assuming that you guys do know what you're doing, which I think you probably do, it's people. So we know that, but also as well, if you don't have the trust and confidence in your practice and firm, how can you have that trust and confidence with your clients? So we are custodians of that responsibility. And innovation and climate for us is integral to our strategy. So we took what ESG means and took it we took it the MHA way. And the best companies in the world that do this have taken ESG and adopted their own interpretation. I go back to M&S, Plan A, because there is no Plan B. Forgive me, I don't know whether there's lots of substandards in Zimbabwe. I haven't seen much in Africa in terms of, we have B Corp out here, which something I don't really think is a great standard. I think it's a building block, but it's not something you should aspire to. We've aligned to the UN Sustainability Development Goals, but very much we've embedded them with our entire framework. And I'm very proud to was made a pioneer in 24. Didn't expect it, to be blunt. Didn't think we were that good. But they adopted that because we've embedded it within every fabric of both our services, but also our internal process. And the two things are linked, they're not mutually exclusive. So, a couple of definitions for you. Back in the day, corporate social responsibility, which was usually a report that was filed by a company, put on the shelf, not looked at for another year, and then it was updated, given to the auditors. The auditors tick that box, let that go on the file. We'll put some pretty colours on it, cross-check it, make sure the lead schedule's all nice. And that was it. And it was actually created by Andrew Carnegie, which was basically, it doesn't matter what you do with the world, as long as you make profit, you can then do some nice things afterwards, like to give to charity or something like that. That's not what environmental social governance is all about. It is not CSR. CSR, corporate social responsibility, actually is within ESG, and it's very much framed around the societal aspect of environmental social governance. What is of the E, S, and G, what's the one everybody talks about most? Environment, yeah? It's the E, by miles. What's the thing that Mr. Trump talks about most, or refuses to believe in? Amongst many things, let's not... Oh, did you know, so just as an aside, I did find it was quite interesting. He released the Epstein files, didn't he, last year? A to S, no T, which I thought was quite interesting. Quite interesting. So, yes, anyway, let's not get into politics. But I want to show you just something very brief about what sometimes people misunderstand as sustainability.
Unless you've done COVID lockdown under a rock, you'll have heard people talking about ESG and sustainability. Maybe it made you groan. After all, the only thing worse than acronyms is holier-than-thou acronyms. And ESG, which stands for Environmental, Social and Governance Issues, sounds very pious, or like PR spin. Sometimes it actually is just PR guff, but you can't dismiss it. Those three letters symbolize an important zeitgeist shift in companies and finance in a post-pandemic world. To understand this, Imagine that a company is like a farmer. You can measure what a farmer does in harvest, calculating annual crop or milk yields, just as companies can count their quarterly profits and losses.
I'm going to pause that there because we're going to come on to actually what that means next. But that's the zeitgeist shift. That's Financial Times. We regularly write for them and we get covered quite well by them now. Why they come to us? Because we represent the biggest companies in the world and some of the smallest companies in the world. And Milton Friedman, so actually, you're probably not going to be leaving the Kent region, are you? So interesting fact, if you only found this out very recently, we have Milton Keynes. Heard of that? The new town built post-war. It's called Milton Keynes. Milton Friedman and John Maynard Keynes. That's where Milton Keynes comes from. So designed to be a new town on the back of supply-side economics and monetarist economics. Now, Milton Friedman says, one of the greatest mistakes is to judge policies and programs by their intention rather than their results. Environmental social governance is absolutely data-driven. It's absolutely fundamental to it. If you think you can just do waffly and vacuous statements, that would have worked okay maybe 10, 15 years ago when the narrative was coming in. It's changed. When this first came in, how big do you think financial reports and accounting documents, annual reports were around ESG? That. Huge. Partly because we didn't know what we were doing as accountants, so it could just, we didn't really know. Now they're like that because investors see through the nonsense and the vacuous statements. And it's like when you're auditing financial reports, right? And you're analyzing directors' reports, you're analyzing statements to make sure it's consistent with the back half. So basically the numbers with what they're saying, particularly if they're listed, what does it mean in terms of the investors? Can it manipulate people? Environmental social governance is the same. And if there is one thing you take away from today, aside from the whole bank holiday, not booking a conference this time, is the last point, the Brundtland definition of 1987. Sustainability is not environmental social governance. It is the overarching thematic point around change and around the use of the world's resources. Environmental social governance is a reporting tool. It is a reporting standard, invented in the US, incidentally, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. First and foremost, that is what sustainability is. So if you're thinking about it for your own practice, your own profession, your own staff, your own teams, sustainability is what you should be doing from a business perspective, of which environmental social governance forms part, as does net zero, as does climate balancing, as does societal licensing. All of those other aspects, corporate reporting, forms part of what sustainability represents. Okay. So, don't worry, I don't expect you to read all of that, and there'll be a few more detailed slides, but I think we'll make these... well, you can if you like. We can skip lunch, and we can take you through each aspect of it. It's not a problem, not a problem. So, I just wanted to give you a snapshot here of this is what we did as MHA. So, we don't have to report, well, we do now, but up to this point in 2024, we're not obliged to make any sustainability reporting. We're not a listed company then. We weren't big enough to to report because of the non-listed rules. But I said to the board, look, what we should be doing is issuing our own sustainability report. Why? Firstly, we should be delivering the highest possible standard we can. Secondly, if we're not doing something like that, what do our clients think? And thirdly, if we want to be leading this space, shouldn't we actually be showing what we're capable of? So we voluntarily reported. And what we also did is we voluntarily reported on regulatory standards. So in the United Kingdom, it's the Task Force Climate-Related Disclosures and corporate financial disclosures as well. So let's talk, this leads neatly on to talking about credibility in the approach to audit and risk, the approach to resources and capacity, and I might say a few things here that you might not like, and an approach to providing regulatory assurance opinion. And I've said this to ICAEW before, and we've had these conversations in closed sessions too, is accountants don't just sign off reports. We have a responsibility. And it's more than just simply a set of rules, I think. It's a fundamental philosophy. And we are the custodians of truth and fairness. You know, technically that's what politicians do. But we as accountants, we're regulated as well. And I know ACCA, ICAEW, there are other regulators as well. Other institutes, organizations, but the ICAEW is the regulatory institute as well. We have a responsibility, and I feel very strongly about this. And I'm going to show you something now, which a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but there's a message in here. But I'm just take a look at this.
The gentleman in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with the white shirt, the lady with the trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff, will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality, but little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we'll try it once again. Here's the candid subject. Here comes the candid camera staff, 3 of them at least. And this man has apparently been in groups before. Here's a fella with his hat on in the elevator. First he makes a full turn to the rear and Charlie closes the door. A moment later, we'll open the door, everybody's changed positions. Now we'll see if we can use group pressure for some good. Now, in a moment, on Charlie's signal, everybody turns forward. Notice they take off their hats. And now, do you think we could reverse the procedure? Watch.
There is it was actually a social experiment from the 60s, and it's a great video. I've shared it with students before as well. It's about peer pressure and about being influenced, but also as well, it's about us being different. And I think that's really important when it comes to sustainability and environmental social governance and what our role and responsibility is as accountants and auditors. We made the decision to invest heavily. As a firm, we spent a lot of money very early on, quite a lot of risk. I had some very interesting board meetings, very tough board meetings. I've been there before. And we came out the other side of it in a much better place as a practice. And I was saying, I won't say names, but we now regularly go up against PwC, EY, Deloitte, and we win. We win against the big four for FTSE 100 listed work. Now, we never would have been able to do that had we not taken that decision. But anyone that thinks that they can do this without investing, it's really, really high risk for your brand and your accounting and your organisation. Because if you get it wrong and you're called out knowing, and believe me, the FRC in the UK are all over this, and I think regulatory standards across the world are changing now, you will get hammered. And it's and also, if you've got clients as well who just think they can just tick the box. We dealt with an automotive dealer practice who refused to believe they were in scope for a UK regulation. This was last year. They're no longer a client. And they literally were shouting on a Teams call, saying, we're not in scope, we're not in scope, we're not in scope. And I said, you are. Here are the rules. What do we need to do? No, we can't tell you what you need to do. They're the rules. You need to go away and do it. We'll audit it. And they said, look, we can engage somebody else, nothing to do with the firm, to help you. No, we'll do it ourselves. Fine, okay. So they got some consultant in to do it over the weekend because they needed to sign a report. And it was absolutely appalling. So in the end, we then audited it, ripped it to pieces. They had to then redo it. And it got to the point where, obviously, you need to satisfy obligations. You can't, we're not going to sign. And it was really hostile. Now, some organizations will just capitulate and go, oh, all right, just work on it for next year. Not acceptable. And that's why the FRC do the work that they do. And if you remember Dynasty in Dallas, yeah, the oil and gas generation, excellent. Do you remember Alexis Colby? Yeah, the very brutal woman who run one of the companies. Any of you remember Enron? Yeah, anyone remember what happened to Arthur Andersen? Yeah, not here anymore, is it? I think Deloitte took most of it. Accountancy Age, which was the published publication every week, we get a hard copy through our post, etc. In the back, about a year after Enron and Anderson's had gone bang, they had a picture of Alexis Colby, this woman titan who would basically always trying to manipulate everybody. And the caption read, auditors must remain vigilant and not be seduced by their powerful clients. And I took that out, and this is 2002, I think, maybe, one. And I have it framed in my office, blown up, to remind me always that it doesn't matter how big the client is and how big the fees are, we must always be mindful of that. And I tell you what, it's a salutary lesson, and that lesson is as valid now as it was 20 years ago, right? Anyone can go down, and if Anderson's could go, anyone could go. So, why does it matter in terms of our credibility? I'm also conscious that I said I would do, we've been talking a little bit, but I think lunch is at past, so I was going to kind of do another 15 minutes if that works for everybody, and then we've got 15 minutes for Q&A, and then I'm getting you back on track, and then you've got lunch at 12:30. Hashtag just saying, but trying to get you. I'm an accountant, like things on time, right? So why does it matter for regulatory credibility? Materiality. It has a part to play in financial materiality. Impact materiality, I'll talk about a little bit later. But do we as accountants understand what the landscape means? Optics have changed. Was climate change an issue? Arguably, it probably has been for quite a long time. Has the lens changed? You saw the video I showed from the Financial Times. Each sector is different. What goes on in oil and gas is different to perhaps what goes on in pharmaceuticals. It's different to what goes on in hospitality and hotelling. Agriculture, which is one of my main worlds, boy, does that have an impact and bearing now. So the fires in Greece this year were bad, but they weren't as bad as the previous year because they took precautionary steps. That cost the government a lot of money to put those steps in place, which is why they weren't as profound as they were before. Is regulation getting bigger or smaller around sustainability? More, yeah? Europe has really set the gold standard with this. Lots of politics, lots of political backfiring. And as you know, with Europe, we're famous for basically throwing everything at something, making it so complicated that no one even understands it, and then winding it back and then having a happy medium. And that's kind of where we are with the rules in Europe. The United Kingdom did it really well, I have to say. Never thought I'd hear myself say this, but Boris Johnson actually did something right. He actually put in the UK's climate work before everybody else did in the world and made it law. And it was actually a really smart thing to do. And I know you've got a session later around the role of AI and the role of technology and disruption of the sector and the way in which we have to change. AI is a very powerful tool. We use it as a third line of defense. I don't use it as a primary line of defense because technology is very clever and it's basically a labor-saving tool at the minute. It's very smart. It can make things quicker, which is true, and you can use it for a lot more analytical work that you could otherwise not have done. So, you might find fraud if you randomly select thousands and thousands of transactions as part of, substantive compliance testing. IT will do that for you much faster. So there is a lot of benefit with that. With sustainability reporting, it's a little bit trickier. because it's a very much, again, a lot of narrative in there, even though it's very much data-driven. So it matters. It matters. And if you haven't considered climate risk and sustainability and ESG within your audit methodology, you need to be doing that. And we have materiality processes and structures within our firm, and we did it long before everybody else other than the Big Four. So this is a snapshot of the global position. And you will see that obviously, despite what's going on in the United States at the moment and the pause on regulatory impact, things will change. They have implemented a lot of regulatory changes with the securities and the SEC. That's paused. It will come back in a year's time, 18 months' time. It will, by default. Europe went absolutely hell for leather. Globally, ICAEW, Sustainability Standard 1, Sustainability Standard 2, you're possibly familiar with those. It's basically built on what the UK did with Task Force Climate-Related Disclosures and enhanced. But it has changed the way in which the optics are going to look. And increasingly, a lot of countries across the world are adopting the international sustainability standards. The country that's actually was late to the party was Australia, really late. But boy, have they absolutely skyrocketed. And what they've done is they've enshrined it in law now for 26 reporters, and they've adopted the same level of robustness as Europe were going to. So in Europe, if your business was over 50 million euro turnover, net assets, I think gross assets, of 30 million and 250 staff, combination of two of the three, you had to do full reporting, corporate sustainability reporting. That's paused at the moment, and I'll talk about that again in a bit. In Australia, no pause. They've carried on. So they're probably going to become one of the most robust regimes in the world. And what we have seen is when you look at China as well, and India, not very good at this stuff, really powering ahead, really powering ahead. So where there is businesses that are trading with those other countries, particularly obviously there's a big relationship with China and Africa at the moment. Again, full disclosure, I'm the chairman of a charity that builds schools in Ethiopia and have been for quite a long time now. I don't talk about it a lot, but there is a post on my LinkedIn, I think maybe about 3 or 4 months ago. I've been out 3 or 4 times now. And every time I've gone out there, I've seen a change. So when people were with using horses, they now use motorbikes. And when I last went, people that use motorbikes now using cars. It's a fast changes in Ethiopia at the minute, and it's fast becoming a real business hub. But every single major build project, Chinese branding, Chinese logos, they're building out that country. So the relationships with those other countries that are doing more and more work now, increasingly, is profound. And I know Zimbabwe, obviously, breadbasket of Africa's agriculture is still a huge part of your industries, I still think. Why are we laughing? Well, it was. Work in progress, right? Work in progress. Got some way to go, right? But it was known as the breadbasket of Africa. Mining, still big. Mining is huge for you guys. I think it's about 50-60%. I think it's still quite chunky. It's still very obviously because of the mineral deposits, etc. Let's not go down those rabbit holes. But my point is, everybody needs to eat, right? And I give regular lectures and speeches around the role of the supply chain, and everybody has a part to play in the food supply chain because everybody does ultimately need to eat. And part of that is that cycle within, whether it's Africa, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in India or China, or even Australia, where obviously a lot is imported. So sustainability and the rules around that are linked into other environmental laws, other social laws, other modern slavery. So you see how all those things start to connect, and that's all part of risk. So you're seeing a real shift across the world. Republic of Ireland is also another, obviously it's part of European Union, but you've seen a real change in the way they do things. Just a brief snapshot around Europe. Task Force Climate-Related Disclosures, as you can see, was something that UK adopted. We then enhanced it with companies. International Sustainability Standards Board, we've just talked about. But independent assurance, and this is a really big FYI, so second point to take away from today, is independent assurance on what companies say is gaining prominence. There is currently 3 major consultations in the UK going on at the moment. One, should accountants be regulated in this space? And I was on both panels. Absolutely they should. And should it be segmented? Yes. And if they can't meet certain criteria, they shouldn't do it. Full stop. Should we have transitional reporting, i.e. what companies are doing over their journey? Absolutely. It was voluntary for a long time. I think it should be mandatory. And then finally, should we adopt a light version of ISSB S1, S2 and phase it? Again, absolutely right. You can't just, Europe have learned, you threw absolutely everything at it. Do you know some of the quotes have been for implementation of CSRD in Europe, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive? I've seen them. Over €1 million for some listed companies, not the big ones, not the Shells, not the, I don't know, the GSKs of the GlaxoSmithKline, just that mid-tier. Million, I mean, if I was and I've been a finance director, I'd be going, you must be joking. Where am I going to find £1 million of net profit to pay you lot for this? No way. That's where the backlash came. And I fully understand it. I think we've kind of gone one extreme to the other. So when the EU omnibus, which is why they've got the red question mark, pause happened, there were a lot of very upset heads of sustainability crying in calls, going, we don't know what to do. We've just spent the last 2 years writing our strategies and we don't know what to do. Help. And we said, we've just got to wait. And my best guidance and advice has been to companies is just slow it down for 6 months and let's see what's going to happen. There is a lot of war going on at the moment. There are other priorities in the world. However, you can't just throw this away. As I said to this time last year, September last year, I gave our annual address internally, and I said to the staff, I said, how was your September in the UK? Did you enjoy your suntans? We had an extreme heat wave in last September. It's supposed to be cold in the UK in September. You know, it either rains or it's rains, really, doesn't it? That's what used to happen here. Now we've got this. I mean, this is unusual. I mean, we are now getting summers unusually, and then we moan about that as well because it's too hot. But interestingly, in London, we're not geared up for it. So you know what actually caused a problem during our really big heat waves? It was hotter in the UK than in London than it was in Europe. Was everybody turned the aircon on. What does aircon do? Pump out hotter heat off the back of buildings. What did that do to the temperature in London? It's quite entertaining, really. And the final point I just wanted to make on this slide is the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, which was about the supply chain and modern slavery and whether or not companies should be held accountable for their suppliers' and their suppliers' or their customer's customer. So we sell, I don't know, iron ore to company A. Company A then makes forms of products that go to company B, who then turn it into nuclear weapons. You know, and they blow up a country. Who's ultimately responsible for that? You know, and that's where it gets really complicated. And there's got to be some balance with that. So the CSDDD's been paused. It might even get thrown out. The other piece as well, nature directive, it's actually longer than the regulatory directive. It's not going anywhere. And Scope 4 emissions was a United States thing about looking at, well, what is the opportunity benefit of us changing from normal plastics to recyclable plastics? We can report on that and say, what a great thing we've done. The flip side is then, well, what about saying, if we had the opportunity to do it, and why didn't we do it? Should we report the negative thing? Interesting thing, Scope 4, but again, I don't think it's going anywhere. I don't expect, you're not going to have a test on this slide, but this is the European Commission in practice. You've got the NFRD, which was the original rules. You then have the CSRD, which, again, is an important point. Do any of you guys deal with really large global listed companies in here? No. You probably you deal with maybe some subsidiaries of them. Those companies still have to report. So even though there's been this global pause in Europe, those companies that are still under obligation to report have to still do it. And boy, oh boy, is it administrative heavy. So that's still sitting in there at the minute for Wave 1 reporters. EU taxonomy, I could do a whole presentation on EU taxonomy, but just to say that EU taxonomy brings it all together. And the key test with EU taxonomy, and I think this will happen with the ISSB standards, is whether or not companies are doing no significant or material harm. And what that means is if you're doing nothing material significant in terms of harm, you can talk about it. So it's done by exception rather than by, you just have to, so you report only if you satisfy EU taxonomy. 50-50 whether that will stay. But again, who knows? Sustainability is very much a political football in Europe at the moment, unfortunately. The financial, I'm not going to talk about financial regulations today, but there's a whole, any people deal with financial services in here, by the way? Yeah, quite a few of you. Okay. Some financial services, main markets, big area, has still continued to be a priority, and there's no rollback on this area. So the Sustainable Financial Reporting Directive, which is the gold standard, which looks at different types of financial products, so mainly aimed at banks, investment houses, insurance companies, intermediaries and loan investment engines, have different classifications of disclosure in Europe. That's been replicated in the UK, and I imagine it's going to get replicated out a little bit more and more and more. Bit of a moving feast there, but again, if you are in that space, it wouldn't hurt you to look at what the SFDR is up to, because it's law and it's happening at the moment. So you'll know all of this because this is your country. So you'll know all of everything I've put up on slides. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. Other than that, from kind of 2019, you guys started to get your act together and start to, I'm not going to go into any of the correlations between politics, but the point is the statutory instruments here, you following what a lot of African countries have done. It's happened I believe it happened in Kenya, and I also believe it has, Zimbabwe, Ethiopia haven't yet. South Africa in particular marched on ahead. You've adopted this for basically main market listed companies, and it will start to grow and grow and grow. This one, you're aligning much more to the United Nations frameworks. Again, as individual accountancy firms and businesses, if there is, again, third thing you take away from today, don't try and adopt lots of little standards within your business. Just align to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and look at science-based targets. That's all you need to do as companies in terms of start to build that credibility. And again, in our practice, we're from the Dynasty and I'm from the Dynasty and Dallas generation. They dress better anyway. I don't know what the dress code is actually. They did. Actually, sorry, I'm gonna, because I've got the floor and you were running late anyway. I've got the floor, so I'm gonna just indulge me for 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes. In the UK, when I trained, this is how we dressed. We went to work and we put our uniforms on, and actually Jonathan and I seem to be wearing exactly the same outfit today, except my suit's dark blue, his is black. But come please. Actually, there's a video at the end, and I can't remember whether I was wearing this or not. I'm hoping to God I didn't, because I do own more than one suit. Just to be clear, I did catch me out once. I cannot remember what the outfit was, and I thought, oh God, I looked dressed exactly the same. I had to explain to the audience I do own more than one suit. But we were professional, and we would go to work dressed like this, and that was how I trained, and in the organisation I ran, it was our dress codes and everything else. And then through COVID and lockdowns and everything else, suddenly this sea of casualness appeared. And this whole term and this isn't everywhere, by the way. So in the United Kingdom, they have this term, is dress for your day. Right, so I see some of our new trainees and some of our 2 or 3 year, newly qualifieds who are dressed like they've just got out of bed or they've simply just come out of the pub from a 12-hour drinking session, And I say, so is dress for your day to not speak or see anybody? Because I know you've got calls. What do our clients think when you go on a call? Dressed like that? And there are rules, but it doesn't compute with me. Because if my accountants turned up at Hadlow or at any of our subsidiaries dressed like that, I'd say, bye. Come back when you're serious. And I remember a very political piece when we were acting during COVID for a big client. We were their advisors, not their auditors, and their auditors weren't very good. We had to kind of deal with them. So I said to my team, I said, all of you will be dressed immaculately, corporate, the whole thing. And it immediately gave us the high ground on the call straight away, because they all turned up on, T-shirts. I won't say the firm. And we immediately, with even opening our mouths, we thought, we're going to beat you up. And we did, metaphorically speaking. But we ended the call going, they've just got nowhere to go with any of this. And we had all of our ammunition anyway. But my point was, I don't know whether it's right. So in Southeast Europe, when I went to our Cyprus office and our Athens office recently, everyone's still dressed like this. In Europe, they still dress like this in certainly those Southeastern European countries, ex-Eastern Bloc countries, all very smart, dressed. The men are in ties, we're beautifully dressed. And you think that's your kind of uniform, isn't it? So anyway, I'd leave it there, but I'm not bothered about it, obviously. Yeah, I'm totally over it. No issues at all. But a friend of mine said in my 20s, in the Cool Britannia era, we had this kind of dress down culture at banks where it was chinos and white shirts. And I turned down what was DRKW before I went to Hadlow, because it was, merchant banks were after the accountants. And I turned them down because my friends laughed, because I have an irrational fear of dress down, because they said, oh no, you don't wear suits and ties here. And I went, really? Not going to go. 50% pay rise, all that stuff. So anyway, I digress. But my point is, the regulations in Africa have changed. And certainly here again, this is in South Africa, is you're seeing shift, increasingly carbon taxes and a shift. Often some of those countries are South Africa is not in good financial shape at the moment, but they are trying to bring some form of regulation into the way in which companies should be doing the right thing. The thing you'll notice on there isn't very, very prevalent is societal. So where's the S? Where's supply chain? Where is modern slavery? Where is transparency around that? And ISSB S1, S2 is going to really unpick that, and it's going to really expect more. And there is quite a tough rumor that scope 3, I think, is going to hit us. So, the 3 scopes. Scope 1, effectively your own emissions, so whether that's your own cars, your own fleet, your own boilers. Scope 2, electricity bought. Effectively, most people don't own their own power grids. And then scope 3 is everything else. Now, currently, reporting is around business travel and your business, your mileage, etc., things like that. But the other part of scope 3, which is the biggest challenge facing all business and industry, supply chain. If you analyze it as companies, what are our biggest emissions? I imagine most of you lease your buildings. Actually, maybe you don't in Zimbabwe. So quite a lot of the more traditional countries in the world, the partnerships tend to own their buildings. So the businesses that we've acquired, they own their own buildings in Southeast Europe. We don't. We lease them. Everything's leased in the UK. Most chartered accountancy firms lease their own buildings. So we don't really have any obligations in scope 1. But supply chain, you will all have suppliers. Yeah? So where does the environmental social governance aspect sit there? How are you going to manage all of that? And what about your clients, their supply chains? Their carbon footprints. You're acting for them. Where does that sit? I don't have the answer, by the way, because no one has the answer at the minute. So those rules and regulations around how things are going to be done is going to become increasingly challenging. Hence my point about the supplier, your supplier as companies. But so let's say you have all of your computers from Dell, for example, or IBM. Where do they make it all? Sweatshops in some far-flung country in the Middle East? Question mark? Are you okay with that? Is that okay? So from an ethical policy, do you have your own policies in place? I'm not saying yes or no, but my point is, it's very relevant to how we as accountancy firms manage and monitor our own thing. So that leads me beautifully on to credibility. And the International Standard on Quality Management #1, you're all familiar with ISQM 1? Yes. I'm not going to do a training session on that. Fundamental regulatory standard. It scares me when I see these people offering to do sustainability work and will measure your carbon footprint or will provide advice and guidance and advisory services. And they're not registered with institutes. They're just trying it on to make some money. ISQ1 regulation is fundamental to the way in which any form of regulatory, in my view, of advice, if we're accountancy practices, and assurance, fundamental pillar. You haven't got that, shouldn't be doing it. The geographical regulations for practitioners, I mentioned a minute ago about how many of you deal with listed, a lot of you are financial services. So there will be interoperability and interdependence of different markets. So we deal with a lot of companies that have got operations all over the world, right, at the minute. So just take the corporate sustainability pause, right? At the minute, there are no pauses in the UK, so they're in scope to do particular regulatory, let's say, disclosures under the stock market. In Europe, their subsidiaries could be £2 or £3 billion subsidiaries, no regulatory reporting at the minute. So how does that marry up? So if there's no regulatory reporting, what do the international accounting standards say about auditing that? Because everyone's relying on the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, but that's paused. So what do you do? What do you do if you were auditing them? Oh, we'll go to our files. Oh, but there's nothing in the files because we haven't actually got a section on that yet. What do you do? So this is that point. I know this is where the Institute in particular is working very hard on kind of the development of those frameworks, and we're involved in that, or I've been involved with that. So it's an important point to bear in mind. So having those conversations internally, if you're not doing it already, you should be. Truth and fairness around ISO 3000, the International Standard on Assurance Engagement, is the gold standard at the moment, which is a well-renowned, regarded standard for limited or reasonable assurance. Everyone's looking at limited, which is effectively a negative opinion. Is there anything that we have not seen? And it's based on walkthroughs. It's not based on control. Reasonable assurance, which is a positive assurance, say that there is nothing we have seen that would affect our opinion, is based on controls. So ISA 3000 is kind of the standard. There is a new sustainability standard that has been adopted by various countries. No one's really quite sure. And actually, ISA 3 might actually be the better standard because it's much broader, because increasingly internal audit. Are there any internal auditors in here? None. Oh, there are. Oh, the President, you're an internal auditor. Excellent. Great. Internal audit, and I'm an internal auditor as well, I actually think it's the bedrock of good basically financial audit. Because if you haven't got good internal control, how do you know that the numbers are right? Hence compliance. So I'm a bit old school like that. But I really, really, really strongly believe on internal audit. And I think increasingly we're seeing clients saying, well, you're looking at cash and bank on internal audit, you're looking at governance and risk and, health and safety, blah, blah, blah. And we're saying, and they're saying, actually, should we not be looking at internal ESG controls? No one thought about that, have they? Just talking about regulatory reporting. What about the controls? What do we live by in terms of sustainability and ESG? Data. Data, as I said at the beginning of this presentation, is key. The other thing as well is that if you don't know this space well enough, you're not prepared to invest, don't do it. Just don't do it. Save yourself a headache, but also as well, your firm's and practices credibility, I think, will get called into question. And then the final piece, which I alluded to earlier, is about credibility. So, as you know, that is a snapshot of the things that we have to deal with on a daily basis, whether that is reporting standards, framework developers, and again, as I said, CDP, the Principles for Responsible Investment, which aren't a framework setter, but they're best practice. They're one of our clients, actually. IFRS and the UNGC. These are all standards, voluntary or mandatory, that we need to be mindful of, but don't try and do it all. It's impossible. I mean, I've got a long time in this space. I'm doing it long before it became a big issue, and it takes years to get this stuff right. And ultimately, when you look about what are standards and regulation all about, it's these guys. They'll value and look at companies and make a decision. We're regulated now, so we're listed. So we have to comply with United Kingdom Climate Financial Disclosures, because our regulators look at it, our investors look at it, and also the Financial Reporting Council look at it as well. So we are very much in the spotlight, which is partly one of the reasons why we went early as well. So this, when I looked at this and I asked them, can I just see what you've done here? It looks like it's like the MLT Roadshow, because it's just pictures of me, and it doesn't, fortunately not most of them are, but it just gives you an idea that if you want to play in this space, and my role in the firm is I'm the Global Executive Lead for Sustainability. I also oversaw initially all of the audit and advisory and assurance work as well, but we've got people underneath me now that do that. So I have a much more of a strategic role within the practice in terms of doing partly things like this, but also driving that change. I still do a hell of a lot of client-facing work as well, but we're also custodians of the profession as well. And I think I have a responsibility being in it as long as I have, but also my experience to be supporting other organisations in different parts of the world. And we are globalised, aren't we? I must admit, when I started at MH, I never thought MH would be what it is today. And it's an incredible success story, but it's not without its challenges. But just to give you an idea, so as a firm, we do a lot of work in the Square Mile. So I'm chairman of the Sustainability Network in the Square Mile that actually supports the people who live in the Square Mile. And believe it or not, it's a huge area of deprivation. There's a lot of very wealthy people in the Square Mile, but a lot of poor people who need that support. So we've got all sorts of initiatives, and I chair those. At the House of Commons, when we were doing something with food. That was the Food Summit. That's my head of internal sustainability. So she's not an accountant. She takes great delight in reminding me of that most days. But she's very passionate about the societal aspect and looking after our biggest asset, which is the 2,500 staff that we employ as MH. Same point. Actually, yes, that was the same event as well. And actually, she went to give a speech to Baker Tilly Global in Stockholm about how we do things as a practice, to share that best practice within Baker Tilly. And that was with the German ambassador talking about hydrogen. So we also do quite a lot of work in promoting the importance of hydrogen, best practice in hydrogen. For some reason, the firm, I don't know how we ended up being a hydrogen pioneer, but we are. And that was speaking with the European Commission in Cyprus, actually, talking about the role of sustainability. And actually, it was funny, the European Commissioner didn't know as much as we did. And there was an announcement that we made at early that morning, and we knew about it, and he didn't. It was quite entertaining to do with the pause of the omnibus. But again, the reason I say this stuff is, if you want to play at this space, and there's various other things up there as well, including the United Nations, and actually that's another university and that's actually the European Commission, where whilst we're not in Europe, that's worked out really well, obviously. Starting to apolitical here, but we work very closely with the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, EFRAG, that sets all of those standards. I'm not sure who, but I guess that probably goes directly through the. Actually, probably works with with you guys, I suppose. The Institute of Chartered Accountants in Zimbabwe, I guess, must work with the government in terms of those standards and report setting, I guess, in the future. We work very closely, and it's always been useful to be working closely with the regulators. A, you get to set policy with them, and B, you get to know about it first, which then ultimately, notwithstanding confidentiality and independence, helps us work with our clients. We as a firm, yes, and a little bit of self-indulgence here, we have been all over the media. We're very proud of what we've done as a practice, and we punch well above our weight, but we also respond to regulatory consultations, and I would urge you to do the same where it's appropriate. I know we work closely with our colleagues at the ICAEW, but we get into the right media, and again, that in turn supports the work we do with our clients. I don't believe we can actually regulate or be involved in support and advise clients in a sector if you don't understand their sector. You just don't think you can do it right. So we work very closely with particular sectors, and obviously agriculture, food and farming, financial services is another one. I do a lot of work in a separate set of rules, automotive, and of course construction and oil and gas. So that's just a snapshot of some of the things that we do. I'm very proud of that. We offer everything now, but when I first kicked off sustainability, I think all we did was that bit. That bullet point and that bullet point. That's all we did when I first kicked this off. We now do everything from advisory to assurance to internal audit to regulatory. Obviously, you can't advise and assure, that's a conflict. But we work very hard with how we do things. Now, that's taken years to build. That didn't happen on day one. So don't try and do it, but plan. And also, in some respects, learn from our mistakes. We made plenty of mistakes on the way to get here. So again, I'm sure this is available. Yeah, I'm sure we'll send this up at the end. So in summary, I said at the beginning about where do you want to be, and come back to that point around the jar representing your firm or your clients, and are you apples, are you coffee, or are you sugar? And have that conversation with yourself and think, well, where do we realistically view this? And think about it from the services to the clients, but also think about it from what you're doing with your staff and your teams, and where do you want to position your practice, and also what you should be doing with your clients. Particularly those of you in financial services, if you're not doing it, you should be doing it anyway, because you have responsibilities in that regard. We have a duty of care, and I do believe it's an underpinning philosophy that we operate on. And I'm just going to finish, if I may, on a very short video of how we acknowledged our kind of peak in 2024, and then obviously the next stage of journey, which is listing. And just take a look at this.
Last year, we made a commitment to be carbon neutral by 2030. Our people are key to helping us achieve this, and various initiatives are underway to make sure that we get to that target.
Baker Tilly Network is accelerating its ESG journey, working on three main pillars: advisory, assurance, and internal ESG strategy. We are very happy to have MHA on board to contribute to this journey.
We are delivering under 4 key pillars: what we are doing internally, our services to our clients, our work with Baker Tilly International, and finally, what we are doing with thought leadership and our wider approach to the services that we deliver. We deliver our sustainability ESG services in 3 segments. First, our robust independent auditing requirements and the statutory legal frameworks. Second, our advisory services under Dynamic ESG. Third, our ESG internal audit services for climate risk management and bespoke regulatory reviews.
The S in ESG is a critical component of business risk and reward, and is fundamentally important to every business's success strategy. We work with clients to ensure they successfully manage their relationships with their workforces, stakeholders, and societies in which they operate.
As regulation continues to grow, we are delivering tomorrow, today, by providing excellent services and ensuring that our agenda is around purposeful profit, providing the best outcomes for our clients.
We practice what we preach. We do internally what we promise to our clients. ESG and climate change are an issue for everybody. Internally, we have various initiatives underway, which means that we're confident of making our target by 2030. To our clients, we are there to help you on your journey. We offer you assurance services, advisory services, and making sure that we take that journey together.
We are part of a global network delivering a sustainable tomorrow today. We are part of Baker Tilly International. We are MHA. Thank you very much for your time. I deliberately did it in such a way that I didn't have to deal with any questions because we were at lunchtime. But if you want to, I'm happy to take some questions if you wish.
Thank you so much, Mark. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, sustainability. So we'll take 3 questions, 2 from here and 1 online. If you have any questions for Mark.
So thank you very much for your presentation. And I know you mentioned that we shouldn't discuss politics, but I suppose you can't really escape politics and political trends. So my question is around the trend that we have observed over the last decade or so around increasing regulation on sustainability issues, ESG, and so on. Are we not at a level of risk, and have we sufficiently embedded these regulations to a point where, from your assessment, political trends will not reverse what we've seen? If you look at the United States, for example, largest economy in the world, huge global reach, they have a president who doesn't like windmills. You have a president who believes in oil and gas, a president who is incentivizing coal production in the United States. There's that phrase, burn, baby, burn, talking about coal. You look at China, which is the second biggest economy in the world. China is a significant mining investor in Zimbabwe, and we have seen some of the mining practices associated with Chinese companies. There is no regard for the environment there, so I'm not sure what the regulatory landscape in China is around sustainability issues. And one then gets to think, and calculate how much investment should we as companies be doing into this? And is there not a risk that we are 1 or 2 elections away in some global economic giant from taking a completely different direction? So I just wanted to get your views on that. Thank you.
It's a really good question, and you hit on a lot of different points. If I can I'll try and take them in a logical sequence. So politics with the largest economies, so India, US, and obviously China. The political life cycle is by its very nature a life cycle. Now, whatever your views are of the current administration, whether he's president for life or not, he will, let's say, kind of current law, he will be gone in 2 years' time. Now, he did this before with Kyoto in terms of reversal, and he's obviously been more punitive this time, and he's been much more direct, if you like, in terms of what he's saying to businesses, i.e., I'm not interested in climate change at all. I'm just going to put money into basically his funders, I suppose, or his donors, if you like, on those fossil fuel industries. China is slightly different because they're on a crusade to take as much of the world as they possibly can at the moment, and they will do whatever they need to do that. And they're also they know they're kind of pushing open doors in certain areas, in certain countries as well. They need Chinese investment, they need Chinese currency, and they need Chinese money. So there's an element of disregard there by those countries and others to just kind of condone whatever they're doing. If those countries if those countries in politics just kind of carried on as they are, which they're probably going to do for the foreseeable, the world is not going to get any cooler, and those issues will become increasingly more profound. Now, until the shift globally is away from the primary driver in life, which is the accumulation of wealth. Let's be blunt, it ain't going to change in that regard. Let's be blunt about that. What is the primary driver? We know it's money, right? However, and this is the important distinguisher, and I say this, Europe, which went probably too far too quick, particularly around regulation and not just reporting, what I've talked about today, but in terms of their sub-directives as well, in terms of being green. If Europe hadn't have done that, do you think anybody globally would have even remotely given a damn? No, they wouldn't have. It wouldn't even be a thing. So I think Europe were quite brave in this regard to start to pioneer this. And at least people are talking about these areas and talking about these subjects. Now, I'll give this quick example. You know, when you have, and maybe not so much, but in the UK, right, people say, I want to be more sustainable. I'm putting all my different bits of waste into different bins and everything else. I go, okay, yeah, how much is that actually doing? It all goes to landfill anyway, pretty much. And, I bought an electric car. And I ask people, why have you done that? Because it's cheaper, not because I'm saving the environment, or my wife told me. That's the other one. But bluntly, they're doing it because they see a financial benefit, or they want to make themselves feel better. But the actual impact of it's immaterial, because it's the big corporates that make the changes. So it's about people in the UK making them feel better. So if Europe hadn't done what they've done with the regulations, I don't think there wouldn't be the conversation or the level of changes. And then the big news about the SEC pausing in the US because of Trump, because they didn't want to have the argument. China and India have marched ahead with their regulations because they need to be seen to be doing it. What is the ultimate impact? Probably not a lot at the moment, but it's the conversation is just as important as the outcome at the minute. It's not too far late. I mean, I know you see the IPCC stuff about, it's way above 1.5, we're all going to burn. I think there's still time. I think we can still sort that out. But there are two words I use for where we are now. And I have no problem with fossil fuels. I have no problem with oil and gas. It is about proportionate, and it is about transition. If we all turned off oil and gas tomorrow, a la those people that glue themselves to roads, right? What's that going to do to the price you pay? Global recession. So it has to be proportionate. Most of the sustainable technology is owned by the oil majors anyway. They own all of it. So they are proportionately investing and releasing and developing that technology alongside with the financial returns of oil and gas. So that is the plan underneath the plan, I would say. So I think what we're doing as a world is okay at the minute, but I think what my biggest frustration is where we make a lot of our money, all the confusion and issues cause huge problems for our clients, which means they come and talk to us and we charge them money for it. So in a weird way, it's quite useful. But from an ethical perspective, and this is where I very strongly, joining up of regulation across the world is what I would like to see in the course of the next 3 to 5 years. So whether it's ISSB or whether it's a mixture of that and European, so we have one, wouldn't it be great? Like International Accounting Standard, we could just have one global approach, and then it's regulated in the appropriate way, would be really good. And I think that would be my kind of key takeaway, that right here, right now, it does look quite messy, but there is a route map, I think, to get us there. But all countries, and that includes countries in Africa, particularly as it's kind of where a lot of the money's going in terms of investment, have got to jump on that. In Ethiopia, Uganda, where we have the charities and things, they're nowhere with any of this at the minute. Absolutely nowhere. And because they're looking at investment. So they've still got quite a journey to go. And there's huge opportunities for accounting practice as well. Taking the lead, something I certainly know that we want to look at doing.